Thank you so much for joining me today, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much for the invite. How are you?
We're doing good, and we're so glad that you can be here. We are so excited here at Boxy Babes for Young Frankenstein that's coming to the Avon Players. But how's the rehearsal process been for you so far?
Uh, it's a lot of fun, especially when you're dealing with subject matter such as Mel Brooks humor. So a lot of laughs. It's a rather grueling show, physically, at least for me, because of all the physical comedy. But I'm thoroughly enjoying the whole rehearsal process.
So, for those who are unfamiliar with Young Frankenstein, which maybe seems kind of silly because it's been around forever and everybody kind of knows
Right.
it, but what's the story of Young Frankenstein?
Uh, so the story, without giving too much away, revolves around Frederick Frankenstein, who is the grandson of Victor Frankenstein, the most famous creator of the monster from the original Mary Shelley story. And Frederick has learned of Victor's death and is the direct inheritor of his Transylvania castle and estate that he has to go over and kind of settle his grandfather's affairs. Frederick has kind of lived his life distancing himself from the Frankenstein name, so he even goes as far as to refer to himself as Frankenstein to try and make that separation as obvious as possible. And so he's drawn kind of back to his homeland, if you will, completely opposed to the Frankenstein name and the legacy and everything. And along the way, he meets a cast of characters who are Transylvanians who slowly start to draw him back into the Frankenstein ways, and then hilarity ensues, I guess.
It's such an iconic role for many reasons, both being Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein, but also because it's, based off of Frankenstein, and you're playing Frankenstein, right?
Yes, yes, I am. It is a role that I didn't know until I kind of dove into the script, like how much fun and how layered it was going to be. And obviously, after rewatching the original film, going on in the process to really study the iconic Gene Wilder, who has done so many great films, but particularly in Young Frankenstein was just absolutely fantastic in the role and whatnot. And the character is just so much fun because again, he has those layers of being kind of the uptight university professor who slowly evolves into a different version of himself as the story unfolds. And so it leaves a lot of room for great acting choices as an actor and everything. So it's been fun to play with it and really dive into it.
So were you familiar with Young Frankenstein, like growing up, or kind of, from the past, from its inception?
Yes, yes, it is one that I have definitely watched as a kid. It had been several years since I had seen it, and so I had actually watched some of the Broadway uh, versions of the musical more
Sure.
recently. So I wanted to go back to the source material and see the original film. And so when I rewatched it, I just was taken aback by how timeless the humor and the timing and the way they shot it to have it, be in that black and white 1930s monster-esque, like the old monster pics type of film, and really see the differences between like the film and like the Broadway, the musical version and everything and stuff to kind of pick up on those nuances.
Yeah, because it really does kind of channel that like monster B flick feel from like classic monster movies, and so
Yes.
it's kind of cool to see that on stage now. Do you feel like the stage show captures kind of that energy well?
It does, and the nice thing is because of it being a live stage show, the music and the musical numbers and everything, the live stage show is a little more upbeat and moves a little bit quicker, and I think that's better for a live audience. Whereas a film, you kind of settle in, and there's a lot more silence and stillness, and obviously the camera can get much closer, so the little subtle humorous things that are happening in the scene are easier to detect. So, like with all things with stage versions, you kind of have to beef things up a little bit so it reads to the whole audience.
So what's it like to kind of step into the shoes of such an iconic character, and also kind of stepping into his shoes of a character that's was made popular by Gene Wilder.
Uh, Daunting. I will not lie to you. It is daunting.
I can
Try not
imagine.
to, try not to psych yourself out with the pressure of it, because I kind of fall under the philosophy that, each actor should make the role their own. There's kind of some
Sure.
iconic traits that come with certain characters, but really, Gene Wilder, and after talking with Joy, our director, and whatnot, that was really what she kind of envisioned Frankenstein to be, more of the on-screen version of Gene Wilder, because he had this, reserved, calm composure to him that also was punctuated with moments of madness and mania
Sure.
and everything. So trying to capture that. But there's also a lot of great choices that happen in the Broadway and stage productions that are hilarious, and they play well to the bits and the musical numbers. So, trying to kind of do the research, and then at some point, I try to make it a point of kind of cutting off listening to any of the recordings or watching any of the movies, because I don't want it to influence too much as I start to kind of make my own choices as an actor of where I want to go with the character.
Kind of using it as like a guiding force, but then also realizing that you have room to kind of play within that to make it your own.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And then I always defer to Joy, because having that audience perspective, obviously, in the rehearsal process, to be like, is this playing well? Like, if I do this gesture, make this face, or if I deliver this line this way, is it reading? Because you can't tell when you're, in it, in the scene and everything. So it helps a lot.
Do you have a specific process for making the character your own? Like, how do you kind of develop who Frankenstein is without taking that source material in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to read personally. I like to read through the script, and kind of, and I don't really write this out, but kind of put together a timeline in my head of the character's journey and kind of where their headspace would be at that moment. Because it can be easy to like jump into a scene at the end of the show and play Frederick one way, but that's not the same Frederick who starts the show, and you have to
Sure.
convey that evolution over time, and you have to do so convincingly, because you don't want to come on stage one scene and then appear to be a completely different person in the next scene. So it's really, I think, kind of taking a step back after kind of looking at the whole story and kind of figuring out what that progression looks like, and like, okay, where are these moments where we're starting to kind of get a little mesmerized by the mystique, if you will, of Transylvania and all of the spooky, wonderful things that are going on, and then really start to kind of get swept up in what's going on inside the story and everything, because he really starts off the story as being resistant to a lot of these things.
Absolutely. Young Frankenstein is kind of unique too in that, I mean, I should say unique in many different ways, but it is also a musical that was adapted from a film, which we tend to see quite a few of those recently now
Yeah,
with Broadway. What do you think makes Young Frankenstein unique in this aspect?
that's a great question. Well, outside of the iconic bits, because a lot of the iconic bits from the movie are captured in the stage version, which I was very happy to see when finally, when getting to read through the script, because there's a lot of moments that are just kind of synonymous with the movie, if you will.
For sure.
Um, but
There's some
what
pieces
I
you can't erase because you need them there.
Exactly, yes, a lot of those iconic lines of like, Frau Blucher, who's such a funny, like Cloris Leachman in the original film is like absolutely hilarious. And like, if you have your time, there is a bloopers reel on YouTube of Young Frankenstein, like outtakes, which back in the day when they were filming it in the 70s were like very costly to like have bloop. So they tried their best to stay in character. But Cloris Leachman had everyone rolling on set when she was doing her Frau Blucher, because she was just improvising and trying things, and like Gene Wilder would break all the time. Um, Sorry about that. On
No,
a
I was gonna
tangent.
say I've actually seen that, and I'm thinking of the scene that it was right outside the castle at the when his girlfriend or fiance shows up, and they just keep breaking character during that one. So I know exactly what you're talking
Yes,
about. I've seen it.
yes. It's the one where Frankenstein says to Igor, "Get the bags," and he looks at the two ladies and he goes, "All right, I'll take the blonde, you take the brunette." Marty Feldman. But, to your original question, I would say what I like is there are your typical big, ensemble numbers, your big ballad numbers. Um, but there's also a lot of dialogue and comedy and humor that's packaged within a lot of the musical numbers, which I enjoy that because it kind of keeps the audience on their toes because you go from singing to all of a sudden, boom, there's a quick little back and forth between two characters mid-song with a hilarious punchline, gets the audience rolling, and then it shifts right back into the musical number and everything. So they did a nice job of incorporating the humorous dialogue, but also keeping the show moving by having the music intertwined through that. So.
Speaking of the music, do you have a favorite song or number from this production that you like performing, or that like is just iconic for you?
Well, I very much enjoy the opening number, Frederick's opening number, and it's called "The Brain," and it's him teaching to all his lab students because it's kind of his introduction, and he's talking about how much he loves the brain and how magnificent it is, and it's this wonderfully complex organ. But it's like also kind of a love song because he's like talking about the brain, and so you get a chance as an actor to kind of show a little bit of the weird side, if you will, of Frederick to be like, okay, he's not just your typical straight lead that is just, you know what I mean? Nothing, no quirks or anything weird about him. It's like, oh no, this guy's got a little something going on. So it is a nice
Sure.
way to kind of warm the audience up to that. Um, but the numbers I get to do with my co-stars Emily Brown and Jeff Stillman who play Inga and Igor. There's like a big buddy vaudevillian duo number that Igor and I do called Together Again, which is is always is a crowd pleaser. I think people are really gonna enjoy that. And then Emily and I sing a song inside of a hay wagon while it's moving and bouncing. Uh, that is very humorous as well too. So
She was speaking about that one. She goes, "It's one of the most like you have to have so much stamina for that song itself," and she never
yes,
planned. She never knew about that. Like planning
yes,
for that.
she's upside down. She's like straddling me at one point. She's going all over the wagon. I get to just kind of sit and hang out a little bit, thankfully,
Sure.
for my breath. But she's all over that. And like I said, we have actors that are like the wagon is moving, and so while you're still trying to act and perform, well, your whole seat's bouncing and you're holding on for dear life, and it really adds to the humor of the scene because even the bouncing and the jostling around kind of. I don't know. It gives more immersion to the scene as though we are actually riding on this wagon that's going down a dirt road into a Transylvanian forest.
Sure. Absolutely. How do you feel like this show has challenged you as an actor?
Well, like I said, beyond physically, it is, and I will just being honest, this is the most physically demanding role I've had to date in all of my acting roles that I've had. Um, there is a lot of physical comedy, which I enjoy, and I'm fully, like on board with doing. But it's like we get to intermission, and it's like I'm sweating like from everywhere, and I'm just like. And I'm like, we still got another half of the show to do, you know? And so, it is definitely physically demanding in that regard. I will say it is challenging in that regard, and that keeping the story moving, keeping the energy up because the material deserves that focus and that energy throughout the entirety of the story. It just you got to kind of lock in and keep coming with it, 110% every scene.
And for this show, what themes from Young Frankenstein resonate the most with you?
Great question.
But that's why I got to ask them.
I
No.
know, I know. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I think the ability to persist or fight or to be willing to change, I think, is I think a big thing because I think we as humans get so comfortable in our routines and our consistency in what we do, and that the unknown, the different, the you know what I mean, the change up, the switch, it can be scary to a lot of people, and so there
Sure.
is a natural fear there, I think, and so embracing that change and diving into it and whatnot is. can sometimes yield wonderful things. And I think this show kind of highlights that in multiple ways.
I mean, that's a beautiful answer. One final question for you is just what are you hoping audiences take away from this production of Young Frankenstein?
I hope that they laugh, laugh a lot. They see the ode to the source material because it deserves that much respect, being a timeless classic that it is. And really, in a world where there is so much going on and so much to stress you out and bring you down, that you really just you come in and get swept away and have a great time, laugh, enjoy yourself, and just not think about anything but the story that's unfolding in front of you. And if we can do that, I think audiences will walk away very pleased with what we've done.
Thank you so much, Eric, for your time. We greatly appreciate it, and we're so excited to see this show.
All right, thank you very much.
Avon Players Young Frankenstein runs May 30th through the June 14th, so get your tickets now, and we will see you there.